Hey, welcome to the Big Bite here on Brit Edge TV with Sunny and Shay.
Now, as we always do on the show, we have lots to come. A little bit later on, we're going to be talking food. So if you're hungry or you're foodie like Sunny and I, then make sure you're tuned in for that. Plus, as always, we've got a big celebrity interview for the show as well. Right now, though, as we do always, we've got a fantastic guest here with us to talk to us about something you may not have heard of, but something that we should all definitely know more about. Lee Burden, lead trainer for Autism West Midlands, joins us in the studio. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It might sound like a really silly question to start off with, but for those of us who don't know, could you please explain what autism is?
Okay. Autism is a developmental disorder and it impacts on about 1% of the population. And to be diagnosed with autism, you have difficulty within 4 areas: communication, social interaction, rigidity of thought or inflexible thinking, and sensory issues. And autism is often, it's described as being on a spectrum. So if you think of a line of 1 to 10, 1 to 5 would be an individual that would have severe learning difficulties and what would be termed as classic autism, whereas the sort of very stereotypical individual that would be non-verbal, perhaps hand flapping, challenging behaviour. And then if you imagine sort of 6 to 9 would be where an individual would get a diagnosis of high functioning autism. And with that, the individual has perhaps no learning difficulties. And then 10 would be an individual with Asperger syndrome. Now, Asperger syndrome is perhaps known as the higher functioning form of autism. So you or I could have Asperger syndrome. You wouldn't necessarily see it within the individual, whereas at the severe end, you'd definitely see it.
So if I take it onto a film form where a lot of people watch films, My Name is Khan.
Yes.
The character in there has a form of autism.
Yes.
Which one would you say he was in?
Possibly high functioning autism or Asperger syndrome.
Right. And what about Rain Man?
Rain Man,
which is the most famous performance from Tom Cruise and from his co-director,
Dustin
Hoffman. Yeah.
And he actually plays the Rain Man.
Yeah, now he would be seen as having classic autism.
Okay.
So within that, he would have severe learning difficulties as well.
So now, once you have a child, when do these symptoms start showing? Where you can say, you know what, I've got a child, I'm not sure if he's developing properly, and then we can put it down to 101 things. But when would you say that you should? When can they get diagnosed for a clear diagnosis that your child has this? This is what's in place to help your child and yourself to help him on his life or her life.
Okay, because it's a developmental disorder, you usually see it when the child starts to develop. So usually about 3, there may be signs. Now, probably the more severe the autism, the easier it is to see. So, for instance, at 3 years old, the child might not be engaging with mom, might not be making eye contact, locked in a world of their own. But in terms of Asperger syndrome, that might not show until the child hits perhaps teenage years.
Wow.
Yeah.
As late as that.
Because what happens with Asperger syndrome, it's more the social side of interaction.
Right.
So as a child within infant school, it's very boundary driven. There's lots of rules. You have the same teacher. But in secondary school, it's when the kind of the social split occurs. You start to find the world out for yourself. You make your own friends. And individuals with Asperger syndrome, for instance, they would challenge authority. They would challenge their teachers, challenge their parents. So it becomes more prominent.
So then you would actually call them kids with trouble. I can't control my child, and whereas they might have a condition that has not been diagnosed as yet.
Yes.
Now, you work here in the West Midlands, and we have a very diverse United Kingdom, but definitely in the West Midlands, we have predominantly an Asian community.
Yeah.
How many of the Asian community do you have to work with on your daily basis here, just in the West Midlands at the moment, and then we can talk about the rest of the United Kingdom?
Very few people within the Asian community come forward and come to us with a child with autism or Asperger syndrome.
Why do you think that is? Is it because they are not aware of what autism actually is, or is it more perhaps a social taboo to come out and say my child has autism? I mean, what side is that on in terms of why they don't come forward?
It probably is a social taboo. it may be frowned on within certain cultures. Originally, within the research of autism, a lot of parents were blamed.
Right.
So it was classed as bad parenting. We now know this is not true.
Okay.
So that, unfortunately, a lot of parents originally do get the blame.
So the people, so say the parents at home who aren't coming forward.
Yeah.
These kids, we're not making any kind of statement here that they're ill-treated in any way, shape, or form, are we?
No, not at all.
Because, you know, everyone loves their children
Yes.
and they're looking after their children.
Yes.
But if they came forward and say, right, okay, my child needs help.
Yeah.
When do they come to you? When do you find yourself interacting with those parents that aren't forthcoming in the first place culturally, or maybe just because they think they can cope on their own for whatever reason?
Yeah.
But when do they come to you and when they can't, they say, you know, I need help here?
Usually it's when the family's in crisis. So you may
What
have
does crisis mean?
Right. So crisis is that the child isn't attending school.
Right.
The child is seen as disruptive, may even be violent towards members of the family, might be getting into trouble with the criminal justice system. And then so it's almost like out of desperation.
Right.
They then will turn to us and ask us for help.
It's really interesting though that just a moment ago you said previously in the past it was said
Yes.
that it was a parent's fault.
Yeah.
Now we know categorically that is not the case. So I
Yes.
think the one message that we definitely want to say here on the show is, you know, if your child has autism, it's not your fault. Is this more of a genetic thing? I mean, for those people who sat there thinking, well, hold on,
Right.
if it's not my fault as a parent, I'm not doing something wrong, I haven't taught them something wrong, what is it, their DNA? Is it genetics? What is it?
Right. The one thing we do know about autism is there is a genetic link.
Okay.
So autism possibly does run within families. Now, somebody that's high functioning, you might not necessarily, they might not have a diagnosis and live full and capable lives. I think the key thing to understand with autism is it's actually a brain difference. So what happens is an individual with autism actually sees the world differently.
Okay.
And that's where the clash might occur within the family, because then this child is seen as unruly. I think the important thing to understand as well is sort of general psychology doesn't work. So the phrase I often use is super nanny doesn't work with autistic children.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does
we
that
see
mean?
That.
Right,
So that
okay.
program, Super Nanny, coming, you've got
Yeah.
disrupted
Yeah.
kids.
Oh, right.
And you think, you know, being a bit more strict,
Yes.
structure.
Yeah.
That doesn't work on these kids. That's what you're saying.
Right. Well, it's interesting that with Super Nanny, the theory behind Super Nanny with the naughty step, for instance, is that if the child has done wrong, they're placed on the naughty step as a punishment, so they learn right from wrong. The difficulty with autism is one of the characteristics is that individuals love structure and routine.
Right.
Unfortunately, the naughty step for them is seen as structure.
Okay.
So, for instance, if I was a young child and I was, if they love predictability, so if I come home from school, for instance, and mom says, go and play,
Right.
with autism, because of the inflexible thinking, they don't know what go and play actually means.
Right.
Okay.
So they get anxious. And then what happens is they get challenging. And say, for instance, they'll pull their sister's hair. And then as a sanction, mom will put them on the naughty step.
Right.
But the thing is, the naughty step is structured. So mom will say, sit there for 10 minutes. And what'll happen is they'll calm down. Then they come off the step, they don't know what to do, and then they get anxious.
So then it's a cycle. So
Yes.
they think, right, my only structure I know is to sit on that step.
That's exactly
I'm
what
going to do
happens.
whatever I can do to get back on that step.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's very, very common. So we often say that individuals love the naughty step, they love detention, and they love exclusion.
Because that's guaranteed punishment.
Right.
But it's because
Yeah.
the key thing
Yeah.
with autism is it's not so much that it's a punishment, it's the structure.
No, that's what I'm talking
Yes.
about. So
Yeah.
if someone
Yeah.
does something bad,
Yeah.
you are going to pay the price for it.
Yes.
So whereas
Yeah.
you do something good, you might get a lucky star, they might take you out for food. There's no structure on how you can reward someone.
That's
If you do
exactly
something
right,
wrong,
Yeah.
we don't know what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
I get slapped, just sit down. You know what I mean? And that's where some of my young life was spent. And so a lot of people can relate to that. But so could you say, so you're saying it's quite difficult for parents to gauge and admit that they need help for a
Yes,
start.
yeah.
And right now, from what I'm getting from you, is that you just described a normal childhood. And my friends and my cousins, they
Yeah.
behaved like you said,
Yes.
always being naughty, and they'll
Yeah.
come to school and they'll tell you, you know what, I got away with this today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what is the test that they can go and do, maybe online or talk to their doctor? What is the next step if they have any concerns?
I think the key thing is initially to go to their GP and
Right.
say that they're concerned, and that perhaps, maybe talk to the school,
Right.
because maybe the school may be able to identify that the child has autism or Asperger's syndrome. And then the GP then will refer them to a specialist, and
Okay.
then they'll put them forward for diagnosing them.
And what would you say finally then to anyone who's watching right now who doesn't fully understand autism and is, we all hear about it, and I don't
Yeah.
think this is an
Yeah.
Asian thing at all.
Sure.
I think this happens across the UK, where the parents may completely support their child and understand what's going on,
Yeah.
but a family member or a friend of the family just says, well, no, this is stupid. That doesn't mean anything. You don't know what you're talking about. They're not autistic. They're just stupid, or whatever they'd
Yes.
like to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to those kind of individuals? Because you get that all the time, where you have these supportive parents,
Yeah.
and then you have this other individual who's just completely demeaning to the child and the
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
out at social parties and social events.
Yeah, I think it's the key thing is it's very difficult for families. A lot of families with autistic children get very isolated from their community. And I think the key thing is that I would say to that community is learn more about autism. They do see the world differently. It's just really important that the family need that support around them.
And there's help out there. That's the key thing.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
There is
Yeah,
help
there's
out there.
lots of help there. I mean, I work for Autism West Midlands. We have a website. Which
What are the details?
Yeah, it's autismwestmidlands.org.uk. We have a helpline, so families can ring up and ask for help and advice. And we provide lots of courses, either during the day, but we also run evening workshops. And we we do autism awareness sessions in sort of bite-sized chunks, and we'll train anybody. I myself do lots of parent workshops, and I also will train within grandparents and uncles and
Fantastic. 'Cause
relatives.
You're never too old to learn.
No.
Right? And if you have to, any family, when they're finding something challenging, it is sometimes harder for the family to adjust as opposed to the child.
Yes.
Or the people who need help. Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate that.
Thank
The
you.
one thing that I will say as well, Lee, is you're doing such fantastic work, and it's really important for us to raise awareness, and thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
My pleasure.
The one thing that we will do in the coming weeks is try to get somebody in to the studio, perhaps a parent who's having to deal with the difficulties of family life, as well as having a child who is autistic. So we'll work on that. If you'd like to perhaps email us and share your experiences, then definitely do. It's info@gridasiatv.com. We'll be right back after the break.